Okay, everybody, we're here for poster 6, Advancing Rare Disease Rights and Policies in Latin America, a call to action. I want to introduce our next presenters, and they're going to take over. And I'm going to go off screen and go on mute. So please, without further ado.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Wainstock. I'm a Brazilian law student, and I'm here with my co-author, Amiel Katz from Harvard, and we are very, very excited and happy to be here. So our research is about how to create laws and policies to promote health equity to rare disease patients, especially in 3 countries, Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. And now Emil is going to explain a little more about our methods and the overview of our research.
Yeah, so what we did is we had a two-pronged approach to our methodology. The first was doing a literature review on historic and recent policies relating to rare diseases in Brazil, Peru, Colombia. And then our second approach is that we conducted interviews with people with rare diseases, patient advocacy groups, and lawmakers, policymakers in these 3 countries to hear the personal narratives and stories of what is it like to live with a rare disease in these countries. And so, what we found first looking at the historic and recent policies is that there is not enough strides being made to accommodate and have and increase the well-being of people living with rare diseases in Latin America. Brazil, Peru, and Colombia all lack on having accessible, equitable, and actionable policies. And so we want to make a change for that. And so when we did this two-pronged approach, we found 5 main barriers that relate to people living with rare diseases. These are barriers to receiving medical care, to living a good quality of life. And so the first barrier is that there is a lack of access to diagnosis. What we saw in Latin America as a whole is that approximately 75% of rare disease patients go undiagnosed. And so obviously this is a problem, and we believe that these Latin American countries need to do better. They have to be able to diagnose people with rare diseases from the get-go when they are born or when they are younger, so that we can help these people live a better life. And the second issue we found is the diagnostic odyssey. And so people with rare diseases who are able to receive diagnoses may have to undergo unnecessary procedures and tests. They may even receive the wrong diagnosis, delaying access to effective medical care. The third barrier we found is the right to health litigation. So this is known as the judicialization of health, and it's characterized by legal actions to demand access to high-cost medical treatment and drugs. And so what this means is that some people with rare diseases can go to court to request an off-list intervention that is safe and effective according to the regulatory authorities, but this drug would be extremely expensive and there is no cheaper therapeutic alternative. And so this right to health litigation is a barrier since most of the population cannot access the judicial courts, yet the government can say, oh, we're doing something to help you and this is enough, but it's simply inaccessible. The fourth barrier is medical tourism and migration. The vast majority of those who can obtain a diagnosis and access to treatments are in the middle and upper classes, and these individuals can afford medical tourism to a developed country, but unlike the general majority of people with rare diseases, medical tourism is not an option because of cost. And lastly, the fifth barrier is lack of interest and transparency by pharmaceutical industries. What we have found is that orphan drugs are placed in a limited market, and so this restricts access to essential drugs for low-income and marginalized populations. Moreover, many pharmaceutical companies in the global north do not want to enter the Latin American market to help, get these drugs accessible in Latin American clinics. And so these were 5 barriers that we found, and these are what we thought of when thinking of our recommendations when we presented that to lawmakers and policymakers. And so thinking about these barriers that we found, we thought it would be even more impactful to hear from personal stories of people in Latin America living with these rare diseases to see what is it really like? Are these barriers, like, how impactful are they when thinking about them in a personal lens? And so one story that really stuck out to me is the story of Maria Isabel Acevedo. She's a Colombian mother of 2 children with spinal muscular atrophy type 2, which is a rare disease. And she struggled to get her children diagnosed. In the early 2000s, Maria gave birth to her first daughter, but after a few months, she started showing symptoms of SMA2. Unfortunately, Colombia didn't have genetic counseling or testing available, and so Maria had to travel to the United States to get her daughter tested. She was lucky that she had enough funding to be able to do that. When Maria's second child was developing symptoms of spinal muscular atrophy, her doctors refused to believe her. They thought that since spinal muscular atrophy is caused by autosomal recessive inheritance of the gene SMN1, meaning both parents have to carry the gene, they thought that would be impossible. Maria's children had different fathers, and geneticists thought that there was just no way that they could have the same rare disease. And so it took over a decade for the genetic test to be confirmed. It is unfair that if you live in a certain area, if you live in the global south in Latin America, that you are unable to get your diagnosis, that doctors mistrust you. It is a problem, and we really want to fix it. And so we're going to pass it on to Daniel to talk about the recommendations that we came up with.
Perfect. So we intend to advise lawmakers and policymakers to increase access to healthcare to rare disease patients. But in order to do that, we asked the patients themselves what were their ideas to improve the laws and the policies, and how we could work in partnership with the patients themselves to improve health equity. So here on the bottom of our poster are the pictures of 3 rare disease patients. 2 of them are from Brazil, 1 of them is from Peru, and they and we interviewed not only these 3 but also dozens of patients. So working with many stakeholders. So for instance, pharma companies, the lawmakers and policymakers, the patients themselves, patient advocacy groups, working with all these stakeholders. We interviewed a lot of them, and we decided to propose to lawmakers, policymakers, several laws and policies to increase access to healthcare, especially to low-income patients with rare diseases. So in our article, we selected 3 main policies and laws for each country, and 3 broad ones for the whole region. So, for instance, we propose a policy that provides a monthly financial aid to low-income mothers whose children have rare diseases, because we know that the gender disparities are huge in this healthcare space. So providing these financial aid to low-income mothers would be extremely important. Also, the harmonization of the definitions of rare diseases, because in many countries they have different definitions of rare diseases. So the harmonization of these definitions would be very important to improve the partnerships in the region. Also, we propose that that the process of assessing the orphan drugs in order to include them on the public health system should be different from other type of drugs. So we propose that this process to be easier, faster, in order to provide them quick access to these life-saving drugs. And we have made like a list of dozens of policies and laws to improve health justice to rare disease patients in these countries. And we have talked with policymakers in these countries to create these laws. But it's very important that we don't change only the laws and policies, but we also change our mindsets about rare diseases and rare disease patients, because sometimes we look at them as like ill people, or like people that are different than us, but they are human beings, and they have dreams, and they have projects, and they have beautiful lives, and their lives are worth it. So fighting for rare disease patients in Latin America, it's fighting for human rights, it's fighting for all of us. So it's very, very important to to fight for health justice for rare disease patients in these three countries, and around the world. So if you have any questions, we are free to ask them. Please write them on the discussion section. We would love to see our comments, our questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation, and really raising issues that folks do not often speak about, and just so important, especially when it comes to access to care in areas of the world where that's often a challenge, even for diseases that are more common. So when it comes to requiring specialty care, very challenging. Just have a question here very quickly. Or no, you don't have to answer very quickly. Just it came up very quickly. Um, do you have a number of various specialists in the tertiary or level 3 hospitals in Latin America? And do they have corresponding years of experience?
Yeah, so I think I can start with answering that, and that there is a lack of specialists in general in Latin America. What we saw, especially with the story of Maria in Colombia, when she was having her first child, there weren't any geneticists that were available for her to talk to in Colombia in general. This was something that was new, that was coming up, and she had to go to the US to even be able to talk with someone who studies genetics. It wasn't something that Latin America, or at least Colombia, was making strides with yet. And so I would say that we don't know the number of various specialists, but from what we've seen, heard, and read, it's very, very minimal and very hard to access.
I wanna add something very important as well. In our research, we saw that the reference centers for rare disease were only on the capitals of the country. So expanding reference centers around the country in other areas and other cities that are not only the capitals is very, very important. And also, what Amiel just told us is very, very important, because I have a friend that was also a law student here in Brazil, and she had to travel to Miami to get access to an orphan drug, because here in Brazil the doctors didn't know about her disease, and the drug was not available for her, so she had to travel to other countries. And this is not only the story of two patients, it's the story of many, many patients. But the patients who can afford traveling to other countries are patients who are not low income. So the low income patients, they have to stay in their country, and sometimes they don't have access to reference centers or access to orphan drugs, and they many times die. So actually, only 3% of rare disease patients in Latin America can afford going to another country to get access to treatments, to drugs. But the other 97%, they can't. So it's very, very important to look at them and help them as well. So creating more reference centers and teaching about rare diseases in universities, in medical schools, is very important.
That is very enlightening, and I really appreciate the fact that you highlighted that's the geographic access to care as well can be so different, and that's pretty true around the world. It tends to focus on urban centers, but we are at the end of our time here. But thank you so much for this really informative presentation. If you look in the chat, you can see some other folks who have said the same thing. Really well done. And thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to see you at the next summit as well. So, so take care and
Thanks so
enjoy the
much.
rest of the summit. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to stop presenting this broadcast.